Howdy, hot shots. It's the Dividend Daddy, your favorite, not a financial advisor with not financial advice. I've got a story for you, okay? In Borneo, there was the Dayak people, and they were getting a lot of malaria. They had a bunch of mosquitoes. They were getting a lot of malaria. So they called the World Health Organization, and they said, hey, we've got all these mosquitoes. We're getting a bunch of malaria. Do you have a solution for us? The solution that they were given was to spray DDT all over the island, all right? Well, that killed the mosquitoes and it fixed their malaria problem. But pretty soon the roofs of the houses that they had were caving in on them. Their roofs were made of thatch. Well, it turns out that all the DDT that was sprayed killed a wasp, and that wasp was feeding on larvae of this thatch-eating caterpillar. So once all the wasps died, these caterpillars flourished and they were eating the roofs, and the roofs were caving in on people. Well, the problems didn't stop there, okay? There were geckos. They had geckos on the island. Well, the geckos were eating all these bugs. The bugs had a lot of DDT, and the geckos, they handled it pretty well, actually. Even though geckos have a higher tendency to retain the DDT in their system, they were doing pretty well with it. They were still surviving. But there was a large population of cats on the island. Well, the cats ate the geckos. That's one of their food sources, was all these wild geckos. The cats didn't handle the DDT so well. So then the cats started dying, okay? Well, the cats died off, and now all of a sudden the Dayak people had a bigger problem on their hands. Now all of a sudden there were a bunch of rats. And what comes with rats? You got it, the plague. So they call the World Health Organization and they say, hey, we've got another problem here. We're getting the plague. Well, the World Health Organization hadn't dealt with that chain of events before. And so they had to come up with an outside-the-box solution. They started airdropping cats to Borneo. They just put them on an airplane and parachute them in. Well, the cats ate all the rats and it fixed that problem. Okay, but the point of the story is that a lot of times our solutions to problems have an unintended consequence. Okay, so they wanted to kill all the bugs so that people weren't getting malaria. Well, that started killing predators up chain, and that caused another health problem for the Borneo people. Has this happened with ULTY is the question. They didn't want to continue to see the NAV drop, and they didn't want it to drop precipitously, and they didn't want the risk of big stock drops. And so they come out with this protective put, basically putting collars on their holdings. Well, I liked that initially. I thought it was a good idea. It gave us some downside protection. It makes sure that you don't wake up and see half your portfolio gone, right? However, was there the unintended consequence that this caused a continuous slow erosion because they were using part of their premium income to buy those protective puts? Now, I don't know the exact numbers, okay? Maybe one of you out there does. Maybe one of you is very good with numbers and very good with tracking the funds trades and everything, and know how much it has cost us to have those protective puts versus how much we would have lost based on stock downturns. Okay, we have had a rough couple months. There's been some pretty big dips in these high volatility stocks, and I have seen cases, and we've talked about cases on here, where the protective puts did actually protect us from some downside. Now, I didn't see if the traders in ULTY rolled those puts down and locked in some of those gains and then allowed the recovery of those stocks to pay us back and build our NAV, or if they just sat on the collars and waited for them to expire or waited for the day that they were planning to liquidate them. But I just wonder if the cost of those collars has been worthwhile. It could be that it's insurance that hasn't paid off, right? Protective puts are like insurance. So if you have a house and your house is only worth $50,000, you don't want to pay $10,000 a year for insurance. 5 years later, you would have paid the whole house off. Maybe you'd have got a better house in the meantime with the added savings, right? Is that what our protective puts are doing? Are we buying these protective puts but they're not paying off as much as they are costing. So if you're buying protective puts and they're costing 50% of the premiums that are generated, but they're only saving you half that much over time, well, maybe it's a better strategy to just go naked with the stocks that you own, especially if you're picking good companies. Now, I know their focus has been on high volatility companies, okay? And a lot of times those are riskier. Sometimes they are not in an uptrend. Would we be better off? Would the fund managers be better off? Would the whole fund overall be better off if we said, okay, let's get rid of the protective puts, but we'll be more choosy about the stocks that we own, and we just buy things that are in an uptrend. We buy, technology-based stocks, health-based stocks, things with a little bit higher volatility built into the options premiums to begin with. But we're not going to just buy anything based on the high volatility that it has. What you have to remember is that if we're selling options, selling covered calls with high volatility stock, we're going to generate larger premiums. But it's also going to cost us more for that insurance that comes in the form of protective puts. So would we be better off buying stocks that are in an uptrend, buying stocks that actually have promising futures and getting 80% of the premium, but not spending 50% of that premium on protective puts? Would we be more well served with a strategy that garnered a little less income, but cost us less to maintain? And so I would like your feedback. I would like to know what you think about that. Obviously, if we had like a Black Monday or an October surprise or something like that, those protective puts would be potentially our saving grace. However, assuming we don't run into something like that, or we're in some sort of what we've seen the last few times, which is like a quick crash and then quick recovery, like a V-shaped recovery, there's actually enough time that we could still hold on to those stocks that we have and watch them recover. That's what I've seen the last several years. It doesn't make sense to me. Okay, it's not the way that the stock market has acted in a bigger picture, historically speaking. However, that's what we've seen recently. And so is it better to just ride those dips out and sell further out of the money calls and make a little less premium for a couple of weeks and give those stocks rooms to recover so that we don't lose our NAV, but we also don't buy that downside protection that may not be paying off for us? Okay. Now I have talked about these protective puts being a good thing, and they definitely could be. I just don't have the exact numbers to know. I have never bought protective puts on my own covered call positions, and my covered call positions have overall been profitable, although I have lost a good chunk on some of those positions when the stocks went down and stayed down. Okay. Overall, I've still been profitable. So overall, can ULTY still be profitable without protective puts, just because we are saving all of that money in premium that we would have spent on that insurance? Okay, DGens, let me know what you think down in the comments below.